Being there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video that I personally found very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a short little video by Mr. DontesBoxingNation that I'm going to attempt to review here. And the reason why I'm going to review this video is because this is going to be a conversation about Mr. Canelo Alvarez. Apparently, recently in an interview, which of course was conducted in that of Spanish, I believe that there was a multitude of reporters that were asking Canelo Alvarez's trainer, Eddie Reynoso, and they were saying, well, do you still believe that Canelo Alvarez is the number one pound for pound fighter? And Eddie Reynoso, I thought, put out a very good and honest answer, and he said that no, he did not believe at the current moment in time that Canelo Alvarez, at least in his view, was the number one pound for pound fighter because his fighter was coming off of a loss. And I don't think that that's a bad thing to say whatsoever. In fact, to be quite honest with you, I think that that probably is the best thing that he could have stated, because what that tells me is that not only does Canelo Alvarez, because he has stated overall that he needed to perform better in that fight, but also the person overall who might be able to handle him a little bit within overall, his fights, and the person that is mainly going to be his mentor, Mr. Eddie Reynoso. That means that Canelo Alvarez has the mindset that he has to improve, and that he has a realistic and honest mindset, because there are a lot of fighters, in my opinion, that overall a big part of the reason why maybe they lost the fight was because, they basically make all these excuses, or they make all these statements about how they were cheated, or all in all they really should have won the fight, and yada 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 yada. And we've seen Canelo Alvarez state a little bit of things like that after the fight, where allegedly he said he thought he won the fight, but Canelo Alvarez later on admitted that he knew that he lost the fight. And I do like to see that, and the reason why that is because that gives Canelo Alvarez more of a chance to improve for the future. A big part of the reason why Deontay Wilder, for example, was not able to be successful in the Tyson Fury trilogy was mainly because he was making all these excuses, and he was heading in there overall with a very delusional mindset. And don't get me wrong, to a degree, a lot of these fighters are delusional. You have to be somewhat overall in that mindset, or at least very highly confident to the point of being delusional, to be thought of as the best fighter in the world. That includes all the way from Deontay Wilder to Canelo Alvarez. But at the end of the day, you do have to be very truthful with yourself if you are going to become a better version of yourself. And that is what Canelo Alvarez is going to have to do if he ever plans to rematch Dimitri Bivol and actually win that fight. Both of those fighters, in my view, will have to make certain adjustments in the rematch. But I just thought that this was very particularly interesting. And not only are we going to review this video, but we're also going to review a Gervonta Tank Davis video when it comes down to it. And you're going to see the difference between how Dante's Boxing Nation handles a Canelo Alvarez and how he handles a Gervonta Tank Davis. Because one, overall, he will state certain statements overall, no holds barred, or, nothing held back. And then overall with another fighter that he tends to like, he would treat them with kid gloves. So overall, we're going to see what he has to say. But anyways, let's get into the conversation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? Man, oh man, you know things are bad when a reporter is trying to force Canelo Alvarez's trainer into saying something that's not true, and no matter how hard the reporter tries, Canelo Alvarez's trainer refuses to agree with him. So let me go ahead and read the exact transcript of what took place. This was a Spanish reporter, and this is the exact translation of what the Mexican reporter said to Eddie Reynoso in Spanish. So a reporter, he says, Eddie, lately in the pound-for-pound rankings, Canelo was demoted to number 5. Why do you think they have demoted him that low? And Eddie simply says, because he lost his last fight. If he would have won, he still would have been pound-for-pound the best. I believe that it doesn't matter as long as we're in between number 2 and number 10. So if we're not at number 1, we're still on the list of the best. I believe.
And I would agree with that. Canelo Alvarez, in my view, still is one of the top 10 pound for pound fighters very clearly. I still have him personally within my top 5 pound for pound. And some of you may ask, or some new people on here may ask, well, why would you have him there? Because Canelo Alvarez did just recently lose his last fight, and there's a certain amount of undefeated champions that could be on there. Because Canelo Alvarez's resume is so, in my opinion, expansive when you talk about the level of competition that he usually has fought. In my view, Canelo Alvarez still has to be within that top 5 pound for pound. And unlike maybe some other fighters that had a recent loss, and, maybe I would not have him on the top 10 pound for pound list, maybe like a Vasily Lomachenko, Canelo Alvarez still has belts within the sport of boxing. So that's the reason why Canelo Alvarez still remains on my top 10 pound for pound list, not just within my top 10, but within my top 5. Now, I do, at the current moment, have 4 fighters that are above Canelo Alvarez because those fighters are undefeated and they've been extraordinarily dominant as well. And those fighters are Alexander Usyk, Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., and Tyson Fury. Those are the fighters. Those are the only fighters in all the boxing right now, in my view, that can truly be debated above a Canelo, even after his most recent loss. But of course, that's my view on things. It just is what it is. But I do like the fact that Eddie Reynoso and Canelo Alvarez, that they are keeping it very honest with themselves, because what that tells me is that they know that they're going to have to adjust.
If he would have won his last fight, he would have sustained himself at number 1. You have to keep winning to continue to climb. So after Eddie Reynoso completely explains the situation, why Canelo Alvarez is not considered the best fighter in the whole wide world, another reporter, he jumps in and he doesn't even ask a question. He just tries to force his agenda on Eddie Reynoso. And this is what he says to Eddie. He says, with all the fights he's won in the past, it's enough to be able to continue at number 1. He didn't even bother to put it in the form of a question. And Eddie, he says, well, I think after a defeat, he cannot be number 1. He, and I believe,
and I would agree with that. And I understand what certain people's perspectives are. I've also had a certain amount of people bring that up to me as well, where they have said, well, I believe because of what Canelo Alvarez has done in the past that he still should be considered number 1. And he did lose to a person that was somewhat significantly bigger. That's understood, but listen, in my view, it was still looked at in the Dimitri Bivol fight as a 50-50 fight. Canelo was the favorite heading into that fight. So the expectations overall, they were somewhat undermined in that fight because all in all, he did not perform anywhere near as well as what he probably should have. So Canelo is going to have to come back in a very decent way. And of course, his next fight is against Gennady Triple G Golovkin in the trilogy. More than likely, I expect a very decent performance out of him. And then after that, who knows? We'll see who he goes after. Could go after Jamal Charlo. Could go after David Benavidez. Could go after Dimitri Bivol in a rematch. Could fight Zurdo Ramirez. Who the hell knows? Canelo pretty much has his options very wide open, but we'll see what he does.
Always said has been among the best boxers and on the pound for pound. You have to stay a winner. That is without a doubt. He lost the fight, so logically, they are going to lower him from the classification. End quote. You see, guys, the reporter knows that everything Eddie Reynoso said made logical.
And I'm very glad all in all that he stated that, because there's a lot of people, no matter what the sport is, to where they don't think that logically. And it really does prevent a certain amount of people from improving. That's a big part of the reason why Aaron Rodgers only has 1 Super Bowl and why LeBron James is 4-6. I was talking to a friend the other day, and I'm pretty sure sometimes he gets annoyed overall from how long drawn I can be with some of my arguments. But if I think all in all that I have a very great point to an argument, I will argue my point. Because a lot of my points are going to be logical and objective. And he always tries to tell me that he believes that Peyton Manning is above Joe Montana. And I say, no, I can never have Peyton Manning above Joe Montana. And the reason why that is because when you talk about the success, especially in that of the postseason, it really is not even that close. And what my friend would bring up is that, all in all, well, Peyton Manning, he has, he basically has everything else against him. The only thing that Joe Montana really has over him is that of Super Bowls. Right, but we can't really take a look at the statistics as the same because the eras are going to be a lot different. When you were in Joe Montana's time, it was not even normal to have a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. So we have to compare the eras completely differently. But my point always being, what that argument is this, and not to digress too much, I would rather have someone who is a 4-time Super Bowl winner, as a multiple-time MVP and a multiple-time Super Bowl MVP, than someone who wins all these great regular season awards like the MVP 5 times, but you usually always underperform in the biggest moments in your career. Because it's not like Joe Montana didn't have a multiple amount of Super Bowls or that he didn't have a multiple amount of MVPs. And it's the same reason why, in my opinion, LeBron James for basketball, why he's not in the discussion as the greatest player of all time. You cannot be 4-6 overall in the NBA Finals and allegedly be the GOAT. because if you're in a team sport, you have to uplift your team overall to that level. That's why, in my opinion, he's not on the same level as Michael Jordan, Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or Magic Johnson. He's not on the same level as any of those guys, because really the only thing that LeBron James and Peyton Manning have over certain guys that, in my opinion, that should be above them, like a Joe Montana or a Tom Brady, or the guys that I just mentioned for LeBron James, really the only thing that they have is certain accumulative stats and certain advantages that they had for their era. That's why the statistics look that vastly different, and we have to count that in. But anyways, just to get off that conversation, hopefully overall I didn't confuse too many people too much. But my point being is this: overall, the more truthful we are with ourselves and the more truthful we are with other people. Now, it's not always needed to be brutally honest when it comes down to it, but I do believe that it's always best to be truthful, because not only is that going to help out yourself when it comes down to become a better person and to become better at your job, it's also going to help out the other people around you. So anyone overall telling Canelo Alvarez that he won that fight and that he's still the number one pound for pound fighter, you're not helping him out. Just like the certain amount of people that were telling Deontay Wilder when it came down to it that he was getting cheated. Look what happened to Deontay Wilder. It took him 3 ass whoopings in a row against Tyson Fury to finally figure out, hey, you know what? Maybe those bullshit excuses, maybe that wasn't the best avenue to go down. It took him 3 ass whoopings, 3 separate ass whoopings from Tyson Fury to figure that out. And there's certain athletes that just never get it. There's certain athletes that are just known excuse makers, and that's why they're not able to adapt or adjust in the bigger situations. Certain guys like an Aaron Rodgers or a LeBron James, that's why those guys will never be the greatest in their respective sport. Aaron Rodgers will never be the greatest quarterback of all time. He will never be thought of as that, okay? Because overall, he blames everything else on everyone else. It just is what it is. All right, not only that, but he just does not know how to perform as well in the big moment situations, okay? Just is what it is. And if we're also going to talk about fighting or other sports, if we're going to talk about basketball, of course, LeBron James, another excuse maker, as well as his fans in the media. If we're going to talk about fighting, Adrian Broner, when it comes down to it, sometimes Manny Pacquiao, Mike Tyson, all those guys were excuse makers, okay? And that's why sometimes they lost some of the bigger fights in their career, besides that of Manny Pacquiao.
But the reporter, he wanted Eddie Reynoso to stay on code. And he was actually surprised that Eddie Reynoso went off code. That's why he was basically trying to check Reynoso by saying, hey, man, watch what you say. Because you're going off code right now. You know what you're supposed to say. It don't matter how many times Canelo Alvarez loses.
Well, I don't know all in all if he was basically saying that this is what you're supposed to say. But I do agree with Dante to the degree to where the reporter obviously wanted him to state that Canelo Alvarez was number one. Now, whether this was because overall, hey, listen, you're supposed to stick up for us Mexicans and Mexican fighters, and all in all, you're supposed to, go down that road when it comes down to it. Or maybe he was just a fanboy. If I had to allege, more than likely he was just an over-emotional fan. But I like the response that Eddie Reynoso gave. He said, no, overall, I'm not going to give you that response to make you feel better, because that's not going to help out me and that's not going to help out my fighter.
The best fighter in the world. And Reynoso, he wasn't having it. He said, I'm not going to sit over here and stay on code just to make you feel better. I'm going to tell it like it is. I'm going to speak the truth. This had to enrage this Mexican reporter. And the funny thing is,
Well, I'm not really sure if it enraged him or not, but it is overall a slap of reality that he needed. And it's also a slap of reality that Canelo Alvarez needed. And sometimes we all need a little bit of a slap of reality. It just is what it is. And Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, going into that Dimitri Bivol fight, I think that there's a possibility that maybe his head got a little bit too big for his own good. But we'll see what happens.
Reporter's fault that Eddie Reynoso was...
Or who knows, maybe Canelo Alvarez just is not going to be able to ever do that much against Dimitri Bivol, because either A, maybe Dimitri Bivol, because of his style, may just have that, his number. Or who knows, maybe Canelo just won't feel comfortable enough to do enough in the rematch. I'm not really sure, but it is going to be very particularly interesting.
Forced to come out and explain that logic of how it works when you lose in a sport. He was so desperate to push this biased narrative that his agenda blew up in his face. Like I said...
Well, I agree with you to a degree, Dante, but once again, overall, and I'm not much of a Bible reader, but I believe all in all they have that one quote, those who cast stones overall, make sure you're not living in a glass house, or all in all, whatever the saying is. Dante always loves to allege racism, and he always loves to allege certain biased narratives. Dante is one of the biggest biased overall doctrinators. He's one of the biggest biased commentators that I've ever personally seen, not even just in boxing commentary, and all the sports commentary. I mean, it really is something amazing.
Reporters that say things like this, they know these things that they say are not true. Because if that reporter truly believed Canelo Alvarez was pound for pound the best fighter in the world, he would have been asking Eddie Reynoso, when are you guys going to fight David Benavidez at 168? Since you're pound for pound the best fighter in the world.
Well, Dante has been on Canelo Alvarez's ass for a very long time about avoiding those two fighters, but he's been stating that Canelo has been avoiding top-tier competition for a very long time. And for those of us that go far enough back, we know that he also alleged this, I believe, with Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, and Caleb Plant. He also alleged this with a certain amount of other guys. So it's just very clear that Dante is never going to be happy with whoever Canelo Alvarez faces. Okay? And that's how you know someone who is a hater. Okay? Sometimes certain people may bring up actual logical points, and I don't believe that they're hating on the fighter or that they're hating on the athlete or the person. They're just bringing up something that is a logical point that many other people may not be comfortable to bring up when it comes down to it. But Dante, you can tell, is a hater, and the reason why that is because whatever happens, the standards always change. There's never any consistency. He never overall gives Canelo Alvarez credit, no matter what it is. He says that Canelo Alvarez needs to do this, and then Canelo Alvarez may do that, and then all of a sudden it's still not good enough. That's how you know the difference between a hater and someone who's actually bringing up a very decent point.
He would have asked him, when are you going to take on the Jamal Charlo fight? When are you going to take on the Demetrius Andrade fight? Because these are the...
Well, Dante, you have said yourself that you don't even want to see the Canelo versus Jamal Charlo fight next, and I did several videos on this. For those of you that go back far enough on my channel, remember Dante, not too long ago, when Canelo said that he may face Jamal Charlo next, what was Dante saying? And all these guys saying, oh, well, we don't want to see the Jamal Charlo fight anymore. It should have happened years ago because Jamal Charlo doesn't look like the same fighter anymore. So Dante overall, once again, he knows where his bread is buttered. He knows his fan base, his demographic of channel when it comes down to it. He knows overall that he is a bullshitter. It just is what it is. Once again, he is never going to be happy with whatever Canelo Alvarez does. And that's why I review a certain amount of his videos. But anyway.
Type of questions when you're talking to someone that you believe is pound for pound the best fighter in the world. You think this reporter asked Canelo any of those questions? Of course he didn't. Because he doesn't want to see Canelo Alvarez in any tough fights. Because he feels there is...
Canelo Alvarez has been in tough fights for the past 10 plus years. And you know that yourself, Dante. And that's why you always change the standards.
A very good chance that if Canelo gets in the ring with any of those guys, he will end up losing a third time. At least officially.
Oh, please. Jamal Charlo, when it comes down to it, once again, I've already stated this. All he is, in my opinion, is a bigger version of Danny Garcia. That's all he is. Demetrius Boo Andrade, he could provide trouble maybe, but I've never been as impressed with him as what many other people have alleged. I've never really seen the goods from him, at least to the point to where other people have pointed it out. And David Benavidez, he's a decent fighter. He probably is, very decently big, especially compared to Canelo, but in my opinion, he's just too defensively irresponsible. But I would still love to see all those fights, but we'll see what Mr. Canelo Alvarez does. But I'm not really worried about Canelo Alvarez not fighting top-tier competition, because what Canelo Alvarez has shown me within the past 10 plus years is that he's always willing to fight top-tier competition. Everybody. He's fought everybody from Danny Jacobs to Gennady Golovkin to Miguel Cotto to Austin Trout to overall Caleb Plant, Callum Smith, and Billy Joe Saunders, to Danny Jacobs to Adeslandi Lara. And every single one of those fights, Dante always tries to tear down as to why Canelo Alvarez either fought a worse version of them or, he fought him after coming off of a loss. It's always some bullshit.
Third time. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
But anyways, that's really about it for this video. But I thought that it was a very honorable answer what Mr. Eddie Reynoso gave, because what that tells me is that him and his corner, they're in a very realistic point. But we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today on this video. Just thought that I would talk about that. And that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.